My name's Gary Cox, married to a wonderful lady called Carol Cox, Carolyn. Originally Carol Selberg, but I met her when I was 10 years old. Sent her a note that said, "I love you, what's your name?" Anyway, I'm 84 now, she's 83. And we live in Lafayette, Colorado, in Josephine Commons. The apartments' names are Josephine Commons for elderly people, but it's independent living. We love it here.
Yeah.
But anyway, I do things that I enjoy. I try to, and my wife allows me to. I wanted to be a paratrooper when I was in the Army. I joined the Army when I was 17. The day I turned 17, I went down to join the Navy. The guy from the Navy was out to lunch. But then, by the time the Navy recruiter got back to the post office, I was signed up in the Army. The Army recruiter was very good. But I went in and I told him I wanted to be a paratrooper. So he did. He sent me down to where the 101st Airborne were the ones who were training me. But they weren't at that time teaching parachuting. They were teaching infantry. 16 weeks of infantry training I went through there. Another 7 weeks of advanced infantry training later. But the paratroopers would not accept me. Because I had osteomyelitis when I was 11 years old, almost lost my leg. Osteomyelitis is an infection in the bone marrow. And they were afraid that I wouldn't be able to jump without breaking that leg. Well, I got out of the Army and I thought, baloney. And I just happened to be reading the paper one day and there was an advertisement by somebody who thought he could make some money teaching people to jump out of airplanes. I think I'm assuming that. There was an ad in the paper, it was an ex-paratrooper, it's going to teach us how to parachute. I thought, wow. I was living in North Glen, Colorado here, and the guy was going to meet us down at in South Denver, and only 4 guys showed up, only 3 stuck with him. I think he was a bit disappointed. He thought it would be a lot of people, and he had a parachute, which he showed us how to pack them and everything. And then he taught us how to jump off of a barrel, or I can't remember what we jumped off of, and how to jump and roll. And he taught us that. And then he was going to teach us how to go out on a static line. A static line being you're attached to the plane. The plane's attached to the pins on the back of your parachute. And when you jump out, when you come to the end of that line, it pulls your pins and your chute opens. That's called a static line jump. So he went that far with us, and we up to the point where we had bought our own parachutes, and we bought them from the Army surplus store. They were old Air Force B4 parachutes. They were good, strong silk, everything was good in them, but they had been used by the Air Force and for pilots in the planes. B4, those are the old red and white striped parachutes, 28 footers. And the reserves that we used were the ones that, same thing, surplus, but they had to be packed by a licensed rigger. You could pack your own backpack, and we were taught to do that. Then you had to get your reserved packed by a licensed rigger. There were only a few in Denver at that time, and they were surprised to get our business because we were the first to start jumping here as a sport.
Okay.
It was 3 of us. My wife designed a parachute patch, which you can get a picture of later, and my log book that I had to have signed every time I jumped by a licensed pilot. Had to sign my book to assure the fact that I jumped out of an airplane. At that time, what we were trained to do was to do 3 static line jumps. And we jumped with this young man's parachute that were teaching us. We hadn't bought our own yet. We jumped, 3 of us, I think a couple of times, and the 3rd time, the guy wasn't paying attention and his reserve chute went out the door, kind of snuck out the door. because the pins are very short on you, and if you don't keep your arm over to protect it, they might slip out. So his slipped out. He jerked him right through the side of the airplane. It didn't do anything but bruise him. He missed getting caught on the tail. It went over it, he said. Anyway, that was our last day at the Columbine Airport. They didn't allow us to jump there anymore, so we moved to Boulder. Then our chutes arrived. We had no idea what we were doing. We had jumped, we did our 3 static lines, all of us. 3 of us started the club. And we had to write to California. I think it was in Orange County. They were jumping so much, and we had read about it. And so we were writing letters back and forth. How do we do this? How do we skydive? We wanted to skydive. We wanted to jump without a static line. We wanted to pull our own parachutes and learn to do flip-flops in the air and all of that. And we picked an airport. It's Gun Barrel Hill in Boulder, Colorado. We drove there to look at Gun Barrel Hill because it was a place that we jumped, where we were allowed to jump from the little airport there in Boulder. And we could jump there because we could see Long's Peak, and that was just kind of a, I don't know, spiritual thing to see that peak while you're in the air. But if you pack your own parachute, which I learned to do, it's not that hard, and you have a reserve in case that one doesn't work, the odds of you dying if you do everything you can to do it right are very, very small, really. It looks and sounds like it's a terrible thing to do, but if you do it safely, you get good equipment, you know how to pack it as best you can, you have good friends who help you think it through. It's not that dangerous. I know it sounds like it is, but the joy you get from it. The rules that we made for our club was 3 static lines, and each time you did your static line jump, you pulled a dummy ripcord so that we know you're going to be able to. And we trained a lot of people that way. After their 3rd, and they feel comfortable with everything, and they show that they can overcome their fear and control their movements, and will pull their own, pretty sure they're going to be able to pull their own ripcord. Then we start free falling, and you begin to do that, pulling your own ripcord without any free fall, really. You just clear the plane, get away from the plane far enough where it's safe, pull your parachute and go into your position for free fall. Chute will open behind you. It's a wonderful feeling. And once that first chute opens and you can turn it to face Long's Peak, and you hear the silk fluttering, you can hear it, and that's the only thing you can hear. And it's like you're just, I don't know, it's a wonderful feeling. That's all I can tell you. And the only way you'll know how it feels is to go do it. Then when you feel comfortable, and my problem, Mace, was I got to feel too comfortable. I have way overcome my fear and forgot about it. But you build up slowly, and people watch you free fall for 30 seconds and they think, whoa, my God, that's so dangerous. But you don't start that way. You start little at a time. And then you go show off and tell people how brave you are, but it really isn't that dangerous. Not if you do it correctly, and we did. Later, and the 7th jump was my 7th jump, and I got too cocky. And we were asked to jump at the Longmont Air Show. And there were 5 of us who were going to jump at the air show, but we put a dummy together to make it 6. And there was 2 airplanes, 3 in each airplane, and we got up over Longmont and we jumped and came down in the ground in front of the arena there, and the one kept falling, And if you're really smart, you know it's not falling fast enough, but it scared a lot of people. And we were told, my God, you could have caused somebody to have a heart attack. You know, that's not smart to do. We thought it would be funny. But we jumped, throw the dummy out. So that three jumpers jumped. We jumped, I think it was a 20-second delay. Bought a new parachute. I had been jumping with someone else's up to that point, a 6th jump. And you always open your parachute 2,000 feet over the ground. That was the safety rules that the FAA gave us. 2,000 feet. If you opened lower than that, you were in danger because you hit the ground that much faster.
Right.
You're traveling 120 miles an hour. If you're in a flat out position, if you're in a head down position, you can get it up to 220 or more. And miles an hour, so that you're going down fast, and if you don't open by the time you hit 2,000, your chute doesn't have time to open safely. So we wore altimeters just like they had in airplanes, and we made one of the guys who jumped with us after a while, this was after we built up a dozen or more people in this club, one was a machinist, and he made these panels for us to hold a altimeter so we could tell the altitude that we were at, and a stopwatch. And so you knew at certain altitudes with 10,000 feet to fall, you would fall a certain number of seconds. And so you checked one against the other. I never had the money to afford the stopwatch, so I always jumped with an altimeter and a hole in my paddle here. So I had an altimeter and never could afford I jumped too much. I used to hawk things of mine, binoculars and cameras and stuff, in order to have enough to jump. It becomes addictive. You just have to do it, you know, you have to have that thrill once a week. I had just ordered a brand new chute. It came in the mail, but I didn't have an altimeter yet at that time. And what we had done with the chutes we were jumping with, the guys who could afford chutes, had bent the handle up at a 90-degree angle, so it was easy to catch with your gloves on. Easy to get a hold of and yank out. I didn't have time to get this bent because you have to heat it first, you know, to bend the aluminum at the 90-degree angle, and I hadn't had time to do that. So that happened, and I was a trainer, so I trained everybody else. And at the end of the day, those of us who trained jumped after we got everybody else out and safe and felt good about things. Well, this was the end of a Saturday afternoon, and the clouds were coming down. So that we had, Clee and I, the other trainer, had decided that we would do a 20-second free fall and then go home. I didn't have an altimeter to judge that, and I hadn't bent this handle. And I had loaned my goggles to another student, and I had an old pair of tanker's goggles, and they stick out about that far, the old Army tank goggles. And I never thought about trying them, and I couldn't see the handle, the ripcord handle. I was just really proud, and I felt very secure, and I had lost my fear, really, too much of my fear. And I never thought it through like you should when you do anything that you can lose your life. So you figure all those things out and make it as safe as possible. I did not take time to do that. I was too anxious to get the jump in. The ceiling came down to a place we had no time, could not do without going into the clouds to do a 20-second free fall. We could do a clear, jump and clear and pull, jump. And anyway, you just get away from the plane and pull your parachute. And Clee said, but you don't have your altimeter. I said, I'll just open when you do. I'll face you, and when you go first, when you open, I'll open. Don't worry about it. Well, he opened. I felt down. I couldn't find the damn handle to my ripcord. and I fooled around, and you got 15 seconds after you leave the plane. 15 seconds, you're dead. I followed the cable down, I tried to, and I didn't even realize I'd rolled on my back, and I couldn't see the ground coming up. But all of a sudden I saw Clee back up there, and I knew, my God, that's almost 2,000 feet. I'm just about to hit. And I grabbed my reserve and I pulled the pin and threw it away from me. And when a reserve opened, when we had on our main chutes, we had a long pillowcase on them called a sleeve, so that they opened slowly and you didn't get a jar when they opened. The sleeve made them open much slower. Mm-hmm. The reserve, it opened immediately, but because of that, and because there's no holes cut in it, thank God, they opened, it was a real jar, that would jerk your teeth out. And then they collapse, and then they fill with air again, and you've got the full advantage of a 24-foot chute, 24 rather than a 28. And I was told, a guy videotaped me all the way down. He said he could see my eyes when it opened. I was that close. He said, I filmed it all the way down. Do you want a copy? And I said, no, God, no. I sprained both knees, bit my tongue through when I hit, because the chute had collapsed and I hit the ground. It hadn't opened fully. It popped, collapsed, and I hit the ground. Sprained both knees, bit my tongue through. And then the next week we're supposed to jump at the air show. And I'm thinking, Cox, you almost did it. Your own fault. No one else's. You did not take time to bend that handle, something you were used to doing, and no problem, knew right where it was, but used glasses that you had never tried. Mm-hmm. You almost killed yourself. And the other thing, the biggest thing is you got over too much of your fear. You should always hang on to enough of it. You think about your own safety and that you got kids to feed. I know it was close enough that never again did I jump without thinking it really through. Have I got the right equipment? Am I doing anything stupid? Because no one but you can decide to go out of this plane, and when you do, the full responsibility is yours to go home to your family and feed them. That's your responsibility. So I took it very seriously, but Clee, the same guy, he was more experienced than I, better jumper. And he had been passing batons with other more experienced jumpers. And he was going to teach me how. So we jumped out of an airplane. I don't remember how long of a free fall we did, but then during the free fall we were going to pass the baton back and forth. And so I just laid flat because he was the experienced diver, and he was going to come to me with the baton. No, I had the baton. He was going to come and take it from me, and then we would separate and go down. Well, we got really close to each other, and I reached over, I looked at my altimeter. For that jump I had my altimeter, and I saw we had just approached 2,000 feet and just passed it. I reached over and I looked at him and I went like this and I jerked his ripcord.
You jerked his?
I jerked his.
Okay.
So that his chute opened. Then I was still in a head down position like this, and I hadn't completely out of it. I folded it and opened mine. But he said, above me, he watched, and he said some kind of a vacuum formed over my parachute, and it just laid in there and fluttered. It didn't come out like it should. It just laid and fluttered. It wasn't hooked. He couldn't see anywhere where it was hooked. It was just a vacuum that I had created with my body.
Right.
That it didn't leave for a while, but somehow I rolled or whatever and it came out. But when it come out, because I was in a bad position, it took this leg with it, wrapped around this leg, and when it opened, my body went one way and this part of my leg went another, and everything in my knee was torn. So it was just flopping there, and I was very close to the target, and I figured, what the hell, if I had to hit the ground one way or another, I might as well hit the target. So I did. I hit the target perfectly, but my sister happened to be there that day to watch me. She came up to watch me jump. And she said my leg, when I hit the ground, went the wrong way. And so she knew I was bad hurt. And they came, put me on a stretcher, took me to the Boulder hospital, and they put it back together. And I kept jumping. No, I quit jumping. I'm sorry about that. I quit because I realized this is not responsible behavior, Cox. Grow up. You've got children to take care of, and I was off work for 6 months while this leg healed.
Wow.
So that was the end of my jumping, except until, not the end of the story with parachutes. My children got to be 18 and graduated from high school, and they came to me and they said, Dad, you remember you told us when we got old enough you'd teach us to go out and jump. We'd go jump together. Okay, at that time they were training people over at Dakota. They were doing some training in Dakota. A funny thing, we took the training, jumping off a stand, see how it feels, and all of that. And my one foster boy, one of them that I took on the freight train, said, okay, I understand that all of this training, and you say if this chute doesn't open or it gets twisted, get rid of it and go to your reserve. I throw my reserve. Now it don't open, what do I do? And the guy said, cross your legs and point your toes. Cross your legs as much as you can and point your toes. And my foster son's name is Gary, and he says, what in the world is that going to do? He said, don't help you, but it helps us screw you back out of the ground. And I thought, it's the truth, Gary. So anyway, the hardest thing I've ever done, I put 3 of my sons out, the 4 of us went together, you know, and I was the one that dropped. No, I take that back. They had a plane that would hold all 3 of us, and they still had an experienced diver in charge, and we did static line. We were all attached, and no matter that I had been all jumping, they were at least smart enough to make me do static line. Not sure that I would be able to do free fall anymore. So I had to jump static line. But we jumped out once. Everybody was safe. We landed over by Dakota. And the boy said we'd like to do it again. So we went a second time, static line. And we all landed safely. And they said, that's enough. And they didn't want to jump anymore, none of them. And it was kind of a neat experience, I guess, but I just assumed they hadn't remembered I said that. Because I thought, you know, my wife still depended on me to work. Sometimes those close calls with death, and I've had more than one, make you think how happy and lucky you should be to live here on this one rock, flying through space, through the universe, that has little bunnies and flowers and children playing on it, and we don't worry about falling off the rock.
Yeah.
And we don't understand how fast we're flying. And it's just, to me, such a miracle, such a gift to be given. But I am so happy to be here, and I enjoy it so much. And much of your life is luck. Luck of parents, luck of birth, where you're born, luck of who you spend the rest of your life with. Thank you. Yes.